mean, I grew up in the era of Carl Sagan and the Voyager spacecraft when we were first seeing pictures of our neighboring planets, and all these things were very new. Um, and I still have, I just love, I love learning about discoveries. Hi, Steve.
Adam, how are you?
I'm great. How you doing today? Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. Uh, I fell in love with Star People very quickly. It's
Oh,
it's
thanks.
so beautiful and funny and frustrating and in the best of ways.
Oh, well, thanks. That's great to hear. Yeah, not many
How
people, no one's seen it yet. So,
oh really?
well, no one
Really?
really. Yeah. Well, the release is coming up, so you're one of the few that have seen it so far.
Well, it really is a lot of fun and something special. Where did Star People come from?
Where did it come from? That was a great question. It came from a few different things. Well, I grew up in Phoenix, and in the 1997, when the Phoenix Lights incident happened, when thousands of people in Arizona saw these strange lights flying across, moving across the state, I was in high school. I didn't see them, but I knew people who did, and it always just was this mystery that sort of persisted through the years that I always found really fascinating. Um, Also, I've always been a big space nerd. I mean, I grew up in the era of Carl Sagan and the Voyager spacecraft when we were first seeing pictures of our neighboring planets, and all these things were very new. Um, and I still have, I just love, I love learning about discoveries, and I love science fiction stories that take us into space. But as far as the characters, a lot of that developed out of work I had done. I directed a documentary about 10 years ago called The Business of Recovery. And that took me to some interesting places around the country and meeting with some individuals who were struggling with addiction in one way or the other, as well as experts in the field of addiction and psychology. And that I feel like that really stuck with me. I mean, I learned a lot firsthand about how people process trauma and how untreated trauma can kind of manifest itself. And some of the people I met, unfortunately, died from substance abuse or alcohol related, causes during the filming, and then others years later. And it just always haunted me. These stories just stuck with me, and I think when I started writing, those experiences just influenced my development of the characters and how everything kind of congealed. And then the migrant story for me, this was written a few years. I started writing this a few years ago. It wasn't like this was written yesterday, but growing up in Arizona, migration and stories of people dying in the desert, and just the people, the idea of immigration is, I mean, we're a country of immigrants, so this is nothing new about people trying to come to a country, coming somewhere for a better life. But I just think that all sort of just played in when I was sort of figuring out this story. It's like kind of pouring a bunch of puzzle pieces together and trying to figure out how they fit together and in a way that makes sense, I guess.
I love that about this film is that there is a couple of key elements to these stories. It's not just a group of oddballs, if you will, as often is, trying to do one thing. There's so many different elements, emotional elements to these characters, especially Claire. I think it's Claire is the main character. And but you mentioned about the migrants. I mean, obviously, like you said, the story was written years ago. It does feel current, but I was wondering too because it does feel like an interesting comparison. I don't know if I'm reading too much in this or not, but you've got the quest for aliens and illegal aliens, if you will, running two stories parallel to each other, and both of them deal with the idea of fear.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah,
why do you
that
think we fear it so much?
uh well, fear is kind of one of these most universal emotions that are very easy to tap into from a storytelling perspective. And fear of the unknown is a very common theme through storytelling, and the unknown can mean a lot of things. You know, to me, the idea of migrants being demonized was kind of this feeling of being the fear of the unknown. It's easier to fear than it is to embrace when you push that fear button. Um, it's always been an interesting theme for me. I mean, I remember reading Frank Herbert's Dune and his writings on. Have you ever read The Litany Against Fear? That fear is the mind killer. Fear is the mind killer, the little death that brings total obliteration. It's the idea that fear does destroy us, and that I guess UFOs have sometimes been embraced as something to fear, but other times they've been embraced as something with wonderment or and I chose with this story to keep it kind of vague at first, but obviously that it's not something to be afraid of, I guess. Um, but yeah, fear. I guess where I'm veering with this, but fear was definitely a very conscious theme for me, a fear of the unknown. And I guess as I developed the story, that those two themes sort of met, I guess, in the middle.
It's a beautiful connection. I think it's such a beautiful connection. And you mentioned mentioned before you did documentary on addiction and recovery.
Mm.
Um, and I was wondering about the intentionality of what you wanted to bring into these characters, because we see that here, and what you wanted to portray on screen with Claire, especially with Claire's brother.
Yeah, well, Claire and Taylor, are two sides of the same coin in that they both experienced the same trauma as children, but they kind of processed it in little different ways. Um, One of the things I learned when I was making the film by Dr. Lance Dotis, one of the experts we interviewed. He's one of the foremost experts on addiction treatment, but just the idea that like removing the addiction doesn't solve the problem. You might give up drugs, but then suddenly grab onto gambling if you aren't kind of figuring out what's motivating it, what's the cause, what is there's usually something. Um, so with these characters, they both were processing this kind of family destroying event in different ways, and Claire became very obsessed with chasing answers in the sky and became very isolated because of it, and her brother became very isolated by running away from the trauma, just trying to blot it all out.
With that in mind, there was a line that I loved in the film, and I wanted to hear your thoughts. It says, "The truth is not out there; it's in here." And I wondered about that specific phrasing and whether that had to do with that conversation.
Well, that line is from just the Justin character says that, right? He's the influencer. I mean, he's making a reference to the X-Files, obviously, but I mean he's just trying to legitimize, his sort of quest for fame through discussing UFO, sightings on his channel. I mean, I guess that's where that was my little X Files reference, I guess you could say.
It's amazing to me that the X-Files still resonates. Like, this show is 30 years old, but we still all know that phrase, right? We still absolutely. Um, okay, well, pivoting from that, then here's a question. When we talk about the migrant family as they're moving on, one of the things there's a conversation talking about there's a reason we're here. Um, and I know that I think Claire says that when she's talking to her boyfriend, if you will. I can't. You just said his name. I can't remember it. I'm sorry.
Justin, yeah.
Justin's character. And I would ask you, do you believe that? Is there a reason we're here?
Well, that is the humankind's search. I mean, in a sense, is like everyone's trying to understand that. I feel like in different ways, the idea of meaning of people searching for meaning in their life, and I think that for her character, um, that meaning is she's starting to discover that there's a reason we're here, and sometimes maybe it's to connect with others as opposed to being isolated. I mean, because a lot of this, one of the themes in this film obviously is isolation. There's this feeling of isolation and disconnectedness.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, I wanted to ask you too about the soundtrack, because I love
Mm.
the soundtrack in this film. What was your inspiration for that style? But it works so well with the storytelling.
Oh, I love the music. Reza Safiniya is a composer I worked with. brilliant artist. I worked. We talked about instruments. I mean, I'm an amateur musician myself. I've been playing piano all my life, and I like to play. These days, I like to play a lot of classical and ragtime music. But but when we were talking about the film, the music scape was very important for me. Um, Bringing up, getting a lot of references, talking about instruments, motifs. I mean, Reza did a fabulous job creating motifs that kind of built throughout the film. I don't know if you noticed there were the tracks were from the beginning and the end. There are recurring themes that come through the different tracks in the film, so that you're kind of returning to certain uh, feelings, but they're growing, they're changing. They're not like this. It's not like the same music all the way through. Um, when I discovered that when I cast Kat as Claire, and I discovered that Kat was, Kat Cunning is also a musician. I was and has a beautiful voice. I was like, we have to figure out a way that this is going to work into the film. Um, Kat collaborated with Reza, and they recorded Constellation, which is in the end credits, which I think is an incredible track.
It really is. It really works and brings the story to life, honestly. Adam, the film is such a joy. I
Well,
really
thank
do
you.
appreciate. Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure.